Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
I was saying good morning to everybody.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. We can both say good morning to everybody, but
I actually wanted you to introduce, so I don't know why I talked over you there.
I was enjoying saying hello to everybody. And I think you saw that joy and you wanted to steal it. And I said, not today, Jocelyn. So it's a really busy week. I am exhausted from it. It was short, but it felt like it was about 4 times as long because it's go time. What that means in Washington, D.C. is we have things written down on paper. I don't think I fully know the lingo because it's all protected temples of the secrets of the temple, maybe. They like to keep things really complicated and esoteric so that it's hard to follow along. But what we do know is you get everything. A lot of people can say a lot of things the whole time when we're working with offices. Oh yeah, you're going to get it. And I was saying we've been in a bit of the Oprah stage with the budget resolution. Like you get a policy and you get a policy and you get a policy and everyone gets everything. Now we're in the phase that somewhat has a name called the Big Sad, which is when it starts reeling back in because now they're writing it down. Now you see this is how much money this priority gets. And it's less than you've been told or fighting for. And we've seen that. So we have 2 committees that are the bulk of this. There's a bunch of committees. All the committees do important work, but Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce, or Ways and Means and E&C, are the 2 main committees. And they have their marks of a lot of the stuff, not all of it, but they've written them out and now they're doing the markup. Where they actually work through the committee and it has to advance out of committee. And this is really the meat and potatoes of what we've been talking about for months now. This $3.5 trillion spending package that could fundamentally reshape this country, changing just all sorts of ways that the government interacts with the people. The big ticket item of tax reform is not done yet, though. And so it's like we've got all this stuff and we're feeling pretty good about things. We've seen a bunch of numbers. Some have gone down. We hate the copays on dental, for example. Building BS benefits is worse than not doing something. Because if you say we're giving you dental benefits and then you're like, oh, great, I'm going to go get my teeth done. They're like, not until 2028. Oh, and by the way, you owe 90% for that. And you're like, oh, that's not that great. Actually, now I hate you because you made me think I was getting something and I didn't. So we got a lot of work to do there still. And the timeline is very condensed. But the real big thing is, what is Richie Neal, who's the chair of Ways and Means, what is he going to do on tax reform? So that's the top line number of 3.5 trillion. If he brings that down to like 2.5 trillion, then everyone is going to be fighting to not only protect what they have. Almost everybody's going to lose, but they are. It's going to be Hunger Games. We already see that where. Even as is, they're pitting one priority against the other, saying, oh, well, we can't expand Medicare this much with vision, hearing, dental, and have the ACA subsidies made permanent and fill the Medicaid gap. And I think our listeners, and we know that's garbage. We can obviously have all of the things. The only question is, are we going to let the rich continue to rip us off? We don't actually need their money to pay for things. We can just pay for things. But because we have these moderates, so-called moderates who, Manchin and Sinema, who say things have to be paid for, and then they, at the same time, so what that means is tax reform. At the same time, they say, oh, not too much tax reform. So what they're doing is just trying to do less, and they're trying to get us to kill each other. They're trying to get the different policy silos to fight against each other, and then we all get less and we don't have nice things. But Jocelyn, you know what we have to do to win.
No, actually, what do we have to do to win?
Well, what do we owe? What can beat anything?
Solidarity, but like practically speaking. So are you saying that we all as a team just go to the hill, camp out, refuse to leave until we get everything? Because I don't think that's a bad plan.
Yeah, we could do that, people who have the ability. But the biggest thing is that advocates have to not fall into the trap of fighting against other priorities. Like,
Yes.
ACA is taking all of our Medicare money, and so we're going to fight to have less, non-permanent subsidies or something like that. No, we win with solidarity, and it's all of us. We want all the health care. We already have lost enough. It's already compromised. We want all of it. We want it all. And the only losers in this equation are rich and international corporations. And that's the thing that we have to focus on.
Sorry.
It was your microphone. It was this.
Oh, okay. All right. Do things sound normal now, Brad?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And it's, I love that you bring that up, Alex, because I do think it's a very seductive distraction. This idea that we have to choose our favorite issue and advocate for it exclusively, but it's not the way it works. And even if that were how people wanted to go about it, it's just not intellectually honest. The climate crisis is a public health issue. Public health impacts a number of other things like the economy and childcare and education and how people are able to form families and go about their lives. It's all integrated. And I think one of the most exciting messaging shifts has been the way we talk about care as infrastructure now. Like, when did that start? This is very recent. This is this year, but it's very, very exciting. We did a show with Rebecca Vallis last night. Brad and I did about home care and SSI. And these are things that if we don't fund them, prevent middle and working class people from basically going about their lives and participating in the American thing. People can't have basically functioning lives if they're signing away everything they have to make sure their parent or grandparent or spouse is taken care of at a basic level. When did that care as infrastructure thing start? Was this a pandemic outgrowth?
I mean, it depends on how you want to look at it, because maybe we should ask the question differently. When did care get removed from infrastructure in America, so that only here do we have to actually say things like home and community-based services, which is long-term care systems, or SSI, working with families, people with disabilities, and that is not infrastructure. That's an American conception. I mean, the dictionary definition includes that. It's really obvious that infrastructure means everything that you need to have a functioning society, the public commons, and all of that, not just roads and bridges. So they really want roads and bridges. That's what they want it to mean, just roads and bridges. But that's not what it is. So
ironically, they don't want to fund those either, though. So I think that should be noted.
Generally don't too. And just like when they're like, oh, the President Biden's stopping the forever war in Afghanistan has left all of these Afghan allies in a lurch, and we're like, oh, well, we should definitely bring them to this country. And it's those same people who are like, no. It's because they're assholes, Jocelyn. They don't believe in anything except themselves. So they're not ever hypocrites. Is launching an attack on Republicans for being hypocrites is like, calling out a fisherman for exaggerating the size of their fish. You're like, I mean, come on, if you're listening to a fishing story, the person's going to lie. If a Republican's mouth is moving, they are advocating for the wealthy and powerful with no bearing on the truth, no actual orientation to an ideology that's coherent or anything. It's just money and power. And some of them are like psychopaths. So I think I'd be like money and power and hurt for other people.
I think it's a little unkind to the fisherman community to compare them to Republicans, first of all.
Number one.
Number one.
I am chastened.
But I think it's also, we talk about this on here a lot, but I do think it's really important for people to keep in perspective how swiftly things got this bad. It really wasn't always this insane. Every single part of it, housing costs, healthcare costs, care costs, this is something that's like everything has rapidly gotten worse in a couple swift generations. You know what I'm binging right now? It's related. Mad Men. Did you ever get into Mad Men?
I didn't.
Oh, okay, that's whatever. But you get the general idea, right?
Of course, I culturally know it. It was a big thing.
It's like this guy, Don Draper. It's the 50s, I think eventually the 60s. But you know what the craziest part about Mad Men for me isn't his affairs or like the Madison Avenue thing. It's that all these people are having incredible lives on one income. Like, it's ridiculous. I'm just watching here like, who are these people? They just go to the doctor when they're sick? What kind of ridiculous utopia is this? But it wasn't that long ago. And granted, those people are like kind of wealthy, but also not really. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where middle class and definitely upper middle class families had access to, I don't even want to call them luxuries, but if you need to take care of an aging relative or an aging spouse, that wasn't a cost prohibitive thing. I mean, I don't like, and it's the thing about a lot of these things that we're advocating for that always strike me is just the ubiquity of it. These are not small niche issues that will only affect 10% of the population. All of us will get sick. All of us will get older. All of us will take care of someone, whether it's a spouse or a child or a parent. And so the fact that we've been living in this oppressive state of financial abuse for so long is just not only I don't even like calling these progressive goals, because look, if the men in Mad Men are living this life, this tells me this is not a far leftist utopia idea. I mean, am I wrong about that though? I feel like I'm right.
The Fox News and that they're like, they want to build a communist nightmare state where when a person gives birth, they're given time off from work and are paid. When somebody gets sick, they can see a doctor and get the care that they need. What kind of communist world is it? It's bananas to me. But then it's bananas that so many people believe it. And so many people who are being preyed upon, who in one breath are complaining about the stuff, and then in the next breath are defending the plutocrats who are doing it to them, and then blaming other people who the plutocrats are also preying on. It's a massive machine that just chews up people. And while chewing up people, just blasts out their propaganda cannons to be like, oh yeah, don't believe it. It's definitely those people's fault over there.
So I love that we're, as always, on to the nonsense of cultural and propagandized conservatives, because what I'm angry about this week,
this is like, man, is there another beer garden man?
There's no beer. This is a conservative lady Twitter. Have you guys ever encountered conservative lady Twitter? It's basically where Republican wives that are like young talk about how liberals have brainwashed women into delaying child rearing and delaying marriage, and how if leftist secular women would really just get with God's plan for them, they would be, probably have 3 kids by now. But every time I see this, it just makes me feel crazy because that is 100% not why birth rates are falling. I mean, it's economic. This isn't rocket science. And you would think that if conservatives wanted all women to live out their dream of having 6 children by 40, they would be creating an economy where that's possible. I mean, Republicans are all about women not having options, and I get that. But if the not option they're creating is a dual income economy, and even that doesn't even work out anymore. I mean, I always like, but when I see this stuff, it just makes me laugh. Like, who in this economy can really afford a stay-home partner? People do it, but it's not really feasible. Again, Mad Men. I'm telling you, those were the days. Well, if you were white and a man, but whatever. The point is, economically, at least things were going okay.
So we should bring that for everybody now.
Yes.
Is the point. And the only difference is that maybe I'm seeing this on a lot of like the conservative radio hosts who keep dying from COVID. And just like yesterday, one of these conservative mini rushes was tweeting about how Biden was lying about the Fox News vaccine mandates. And it's just become super clear. You're like, oh God, you guys aren't in on the con. The con is on you too. You don't know that these rich people here, they don't care about you. And similarly, they're like religious beliefs, the people who are actually, there's hard people who believe it, but the bosses on the right wing, they're not driven by that. They want wage slaves. So they don't want to create policies that actually help people live, in fulfilling lives. They want to make sure that people are scrounging and underwater as much as possible so that they'll take any job that's on offer, no matter how dangerous and for how little money. That's why, their worldview, again, it's just money, power, and pain for other people. So I think another way of looking at it, and without bringing in, Mad Men, is you can also just look at if the whole reactionary idea of when we go back, things get better. What they mean is when we go back and people of color are subjugated and women are subjugated. That's the part that they're looking at, and they're completely wrong. What they should be looking at are the tax rates of the timing when they are talking about, and the union density of the timing when they're talking about. And coming out of World War II, the marginal tax rate on the richest Americans was around 90%. We had more union members in this country than ever before. And the middle class was actually attainable. The working class and middle class, you could have jobs that created wealth. And the rich people were still rich. They just weren't world-destroyingly rich. And so because rich people have a sickness, not like we should pity them, but that we should understand that they will never be satisfied, that no matter how much they are able to squeeze out of all of us, they will still squeeze more. No matter how much they light the world on fire to make money, they will still light it on fire more. They are compulsively pulling in money in the same way that a person who's addicted to something is. That's what they're addicted to money. And so they changed the economy, and it's hurting them in the end too. I mean, they're going to be on a dead planet. I should say the planet's going to be fine. The planet is not going to die. Humans are going to die. In fact, other animals are not going to die. And I'm hoping that it's lemurs who take over when we, as humans, mass destroy ourselves so that, some collection of dudes can ride around on their golden yacht. But that's the part, Jocelyn, that I think you're looking at and talking about that's totally true, is that in that moment, working people had an enormous amount of power. And because they had an enormous amount of power, the gains of their productivity were directed into their pockets. Then 1980 happens and the neoliberal garbage comes in. We start selling off public resources for private gain, right? With the whole idea of efficiency is mind-boggling to me. Like, I want one person to tell me one time that we gave an electrical public utility, we gave it to the private market, and now you're like, and it is working fantastic for me. Woo! Man, these private utilities really got my back. Never. It's never worked that way. It just makes somebody's cousin rich. And then all the other neoliberal policies that just disconnected workers from the gains of their productivity. And instead of the gains of their productivity going into their pockets to our pockets, they go right into the boss's pocket. And it's no longer, the boss makes $1, I make a dime. That's why I surf the internet on company time. Good for you. But that's not even what it is anymore. The boss makes $15 and I make nothing. And I'm just happy that I'm not dead and maybe I can see a doctor and still I'm going to be bankrupted, right? Like, the system has gone in some sort of Mobius strip of terrible. And we have an opportunity to it's not radical. It's not like we're not building the utopian vision. We're just like, we can have a little bit for being good,
right,
please.
Well, and this is why, again, I mean, I as always, sort of resent the way that reconciliation is being framed in a lot of mainstream media sources. It's like, wow, like, we're going to have all this far left stuff is happening. Nothing that is happening on Capitol Hill right now is far left. Even if we got every single thing we're asking for, still not far left. So my boyfriend and I were playing one of those like you ask someone a question game. It's like what is your political party or whatever, and he got that one and asked me, and it was like a joke because obviously you people know how I feel politically, but it was like left, right, or moderate. And it's so funny because I would actually argue everything expressed on this show is pretty moderate. Like, I'm sorry, I refuse to subscribe to the idea that basically accessible healthcare, a livable planet, and an economy that doesn't crush its workers to death is some kind of Marxist fever dream. It's just not. It's like Eisenhower's America with a couple edits, important edits. Again, the racial situation then was not great. But these are not the thing. We've been gaslit into thinking that the things we want are unreasonable. And that is at a cultural level, regardless of what happens, is something that just has to change. It has to change. And it's something that, I think a lot about this with my generation specifically. We have had this tremendous con played on us that work is supposed to be where we realize all our existential dreams, hustle culture, startup culture. It's going to be this great thing. We work, and it's work is not meant there to be there to have some kind of religious experience for you. Work is there so you don't starve and die, so you eat. And this extended gaslighting process that we've all been engaged in since we were born means we forget that we're supposed to be coming together and advocating for safer conditions, for a safer planet, for healthcare, even if the job you do isn't some glamorous, exciting, creatively fulfilling thing. In fact, I would argue that that's not even how humans aren't fulfilled exclusively through labor. They're just not. That is a capitalist talking point. Although, do you disagree with that, Alex? I don't know if we've actually had that conversation.
No, absolutely. I don't disagree with that. We have talked about it in the idea that without art, without the good things, then we'd be irredeemable because there's more than enough bad. You just you can list them, like Jeff Bezos, bad. Rupert Murdoch, bad. There's more than Mitch McConnell, bad. praise to a blood god whose altar is in his closet, in his office in the Senate. Bad people, bad stuff. And looking around, I can see being like, maybe humans shouldn't, maybe, but then luckily, I can go to the Barnes collection in Philly. Actually, luckily now I found all of these art bots on Twitter. So my tweets are just like fire hose of political information, and then all of the great museums, just bots that just put up all of their art all the time. And that sort of expression is the thing that I'm like, all right, fine, humanity, I guess we are worth fighting for. What Sagan said, it's the ability of consciousness to appreciate beauty. That is a remarkable thing that is worthy of being protected as a goal, without any other reason, just that we can appreciate beauty. And that is it. And when we're talking about solidarity and working together, it's not just it's for the purpose of building a world that is worth being proud of, and fighting for our children and our children's children, or ourselves. Just that we want to have a world where we don't have to bow and scrape at the feet of a bunch of billionaire bros who all they are is lucky. And we've done, like, sometimes in the big discourse, we've done a pretty decent job of going in the direction away from, people's blood gives them the right to do certain things. Usually we don't come to that through enlightenment, just as if you read history. Usually we come to that from like the cataclysmic proof of like somebody inherits the power because of their birth and blood, and that person is horrible and blows everything up. And then we're like, hey, maybe absolute power passed down in this manner doesn't make any sense. So we get away from there, but then we just recreate it all the time too, because of the reactionary forces. So the billionaire class, the plutocrats, that's just the aristocracy. That's just the oligarchy. That's a story as old as time. That is just the few who believe that they are inherently better than the many and can inherently do a better job when their what they want is fulfilled. That's better for everybody than when the people's will is followed. So we're just returning again to what we talk about, Jocelyn, all the time. And I do think that, although not radical, $3.5 trillion is a lot of money. And we are going to see, first of all, we're going to see if the Democrats have it in them, if they've got the backbone, if they've eaten their Wheaties in the morning, because it is go time. And we'll see. We're going to see, are they more attuned to the will of their constituents, of the people, or of their donors? And we're going to see that when Richie Neal puts out his tax reform part. That's when the rubber meets the road. So far on the benefits side, it's been a good. We've seen a lot of good things on how we're going to spend it. And now it's sort of where the rubber meets the road. Because if that number comes way down from 3.5 to 2.5 or something like that, if it comes down at all, then we are going to be in this Hunger Games situation where we're all pitted against each other. And we have to just reject that. That is not how we get nice things.
Well, so what should people be doing right now?
Now is definitely the time to direct. Its leadership is the whole kit and caboodle right now. So Richie Neal is the chair of Ways and Means. Frank Pallone is the chair of E&C. And Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. And those three are a triumvirate operating. Now you have the White House and you have Schumer and Senate leadership involved. But at this point in the process, it's very House driven. And Frank Pallone's from the Jersey Shore. Richie Neal's from Massachusetts, Boston-ish area. Nancy Pelosi's from San Francisco. So if they're your member, definitely as much as possible, contact them, but they are also in leadership. So they work for everybody. And so now's the time to make sure that they're hearing that we don't want one thing. It's not a please, can I have a little for being good. It's we want it all. We want it all. I think there's a Queen song, and that's what I've been trying to like. That should be the letter or the email or the phone calls when you get your voice into these electeds. So that's what people can be doing right now. And, if you're a little, you can go to Social Security Works social media. We have all sorts of graphics. You can share them. You can tweet them at your members. But right now, the members are under intense pressure from corporate lobbyists, intense pressure, just daily onslaught from these lobbyists who work for the few. And they have to hear from the many. And so now it's I think I offend some people with my sort of violent war imagery, or sometimes I just think of politics as a giant bar fight, and people are like, well, it's more nuanced. And yeah, it's more. I can do policy too. But at the end of the day, it is a giant bar fight. And if you're losing, get a bigger gang. And then keep fighting. And if you're winning, don't stop fighting. That's the hippie thing, man. We will be winning. Our opponent is on the ground and we're like, oh, let me offer you a hand up. Don't offer them a hand up. Kick them. They're closer to your foot. That's the only way to win, is to fight for everything. The moment you hesitate and will accept less, you're going to get nothing. Everyone should tattoo that on your neck. Fight for all of it. We don't have to compromise. They can compromise. They might have to, but they should just know exactly where we are so that they can't be like, oh, you wanted all the nice things. We thought you only wanted 10% of the nice things. So that's where we are right now. This week, it's the end of this week. We've seen a lot of stuff. Next week is basically the revenue week and a lot of the last parts of this. So right now is the moment to get your voice heard.
Well, and I think that, as you're talking, I know we talk about this a lot. I think it's really difficult to wrap our minds around how much is at stake, because it is very abstract, or can feel very abstract. It's, and especially when the way we're receiving this information is digitally through social media, reading the papers, like it feels very heady, but it's not. I mean, we literally found out a few weeks ago that we are at a code red for humanity. The planet is declaring World War III on us, and we deserve it. Like, I'm not actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to say that. We don't deserve that. Middle-class Americans and upper middle-class Americans even did not cause the climate crisis. This was caused by like 10 people with billions of dollars and lots of petrochemical companies. These are the people. That's another thing that's, trying to hold oil and gas companies accountable is bundled in there. That's very important.
Hugely. This would be the most fundamental steps that have ever been taken at addressing the climate crisis are included. And so that's like part of what we're talking about. Like, we can't let the bosses be like, oh, you can either have healthcare or the world won't burn. And you're like, no, I want both. And healthcare, the world won't burn. We get family leave. We get, oh, right. Sorry, I cut you off, Jocelyn. Keep going.
Well, I mean, this is like every single progressive group that does anything with climate right now is pointing out, climate crisis was never really some distant thing. By the time we started talking about it, it was already happening. But now it is like happening. Hurricane Ida has devastated, so many parts of this country. Every time you wake up, a different part of the West Coast is on fire. Texas is frozen over. Then it's happening now. It's happening now. And it's so essential that we not allow ourselves to have our very survival politicized. And any basically saner time in human history, this wouldn't be a partisan issue. because it's ultimately not. The survival of the species is not a partisan issue in any number of other countries, which, like, the climate denial thing is a very American thing and a very recent one, too. I mean, everyone remembers Nixon was pretty big on the environment. He wasn't exactly a comrade. And it's, as we push forward with this, it's just so important to remember that we're not talking about luxuries or life being the best thing it's ever been. We're talking about our basic ability to survive. I mean, they've been doing all kinds of think pieces and studies about how a number of people my age are literally choosing not to have kids because of this. And it's something that you think about, right? Like, do I have kids given that we're in a code red for humanity? And that's a terrifying thing. I mean, we sort of have a comparable, our grandparents had the bomb or whatever. But it's very different when you know it's going to happen, which is what the IPCC report said. I mean, I don't know. I feel like those two things are comparable. But what do you think, Alex?
I think that we have faced things that are easier and harder than the climate crisis, and we are still here. So we have like a decent ability. So I'm pretty optimistic.
I like that.
But I will also say I have this. I don't know if I'll be able to formulate it that well, but so maybe our generation is really unlucky in a way because like we can see a future that is not there if we don't actually beat these incredibly well-moneyed and powerful nihilists who don't care about the future. They don't believe in the future. They only want now. So like that's sad, but we can beat them. But I also think we're one of the luckiest generations. The boomers are probably the luckiest because you say at a saner point in history, and as a student of history, I am willing to go on record and say that there are not that many of them.
That's fair.
Not that many. And if you want some evidence, I can go deep on this one, but I won't go too deep and just say, look at before World War I. It was the first stage of globalization. There was horrible colonialism. That was the engine of globalization. But the empires, when you were sitting in one of the empires, which were the vast majority of Europe, was all the empires. You had the Russians, you had the Austro-Hungarians, you had the British. You could get products from all over the world. Like they were living pretty. They had the best. There's economics that in the mercantile system that don't make sense because they only made sense because they were built up like they worked, and that's why they worked. But once it fell, you could never build them back. You could never build that. Everyone knew that. There were like newspaper articles like, hey, if you mess with this, we will never attain the standard of living that we have now again. I promise you that. And everyone's like sharing that. And these dudes were like, I say, let's blow up the world, especially ourselves. And they did. They just all went to war with each other and they destroyed all of it for nothing. Nobody won. That's, I think, one of the fundamental things of why I read history is to remind myself that there is no cavalry coming. And in fact, to bet on like the sanity of or the gestalt being like, let's not destroy things. There has to be an active push by the people, because the first thing that happens is the organs of state ossify, the pieces of the system start eroding and degrading, and people rely on them and are like, oh, well, that would never let me down. Somebody must be taking care of that. No, we have to take care of that.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think it is kind of really impressive when you think about how far we've come and not far. Like, okay, so you have the progressives of the early 20th century. They got a lot done. A lot done. Like Eugene Debs and his comrades, like that whole era of history, the labor movement in America created so many things that we're still benefiting from today. I mean, when really at the end of the day, when you look at the ideas that we've been pummeled with throughout the human experience, it's actually kind of a marvelous and wondrous thing that progressive movements were not able to just win, but to form at all. I was really been thinking about this a lot lately. We take for granted the amount of information that we have access to, the internet, library books, audiobooks. We can just know everything that's going on with our government. I mean, it's pretty much out there. Now we have this other problem where people are creating conspiracy theories online and Facebook is selling us to the Nazis, but whatever, that's a different conversation. It wasn't that long ago, though, where even books were luxury items for wealthy families. Like a book was like $400 and you had to be rich to even know how to read. So, you're right, Alex. I mean, we do have a lot of privileges. And it is kind of, if we cannot die, it's exciting.
But I think my point is yes. And my point is that we have to do it. There's a, what's that word like means sleepy, soporificness. It's like a ton of the propaganda is to just like make people be like, no, don't worry. You don't have to worry about it. We got your best interest at heart. And you're like, no, they don't. They do not.
What is that adjective? Because I would love to know what it is.
Don't listen to them. When have you ever been on hold talking to a corporation and been like, yes, I love these guys. You know who I love? Comcast. They always are looking out for me. My needs are their needs. Man, I love corporations. And it's just not true. There is no cavalry coming. We have gotten ourselves here. And never underestimate what it is that we can do, because the progressive gains that you were talking about and hundreds of years before, the idea, it depends on when you want to start, but Enlightenment forward, it's hard fought, hard scrapping, and the forces of reaction are very powerful. They have money. They don't have qualms. They don't have moral compasses. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they murder. They do all of the things, and they will own the state if possible. I mean, look at Donald Trump still is pushing this idea that he did not lose, that the election was stolen from him. And then they go down to the country of my Brazilian family, and now they're trying to foment a coup in the fourth largest democracy in the world, in Brazil. It's just, it metastasizes, but it's one thing. It's one fight. It's the fight of progress versus reaction. It's the fight of people who want to build a world that we can be proud of and happy with versus those who would subjugate people for their own benefit. And that's just the fight that we're in. And don't think that we've lost. That's their big thing. They want you to believe that you have no power. You have power. You have all the power. As creaky as our system is, as dishonest and corrupt as our system is, there are immense levers of power that still exist for the people, like calling members of Congress and telling them straightforwardly that if they don't get us what we want, we will fire them. And that is our power. We can take it to a philosophical place and all of that, but we can also just say, motivate them with the fear of losing their jobs, motivate them with, no matter how much their donors give them, we will not rest until we end their careers if they don't give us what we want. So I learned this trick today, Jocelyn, made me so happy. I don't know if it'll work for everybody, but so 202-224-3121 is the Capitol switchboard number. And I always bring it up on a screen over here so that I say it right. 202-224-3121. And then on our Slack, Phelan pointed out, you can always remember it as the Prince album 3121, and I'm like, oh, all right, perfect. I'll never forget the end of the number now. 202-224-3121. Just think of Prince and remember that you can just call that and ask to be connected to your member of Congress, your senators, and just make your voice heard. We have scripts. We have everything written down if you want it. You can also just call them and tell them in your own words why you want health care, why you want paid family leave, why you don't want to live and die on an inhospitable world that's on fire, right? Like pretty basic stuff. I don't want the next hurricane to kill me and my family. I don't want to not have electricity because the utilities are more interested in making money than providing electricity. Make it simple. Make your voice heard.
Well, and I think another, I very rarely speak glowingly of members of Congress, but I do think when we're discussing the people we dislike the most, with reason, we put members in a different category because, again, there are a lot of people on Capitol Hill doing really good things. Rebecca Vallis was interviewing a lot of them last night. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, Congressman Jamal Bowman, like people who are real people who are putting, years of their lives into fighting for the American public. And there are a lot of those people in Congress. And then there are also a lot of people that can be persuaded. When we're talking about the overlords, we're not talking about members, a lot of whom, it's something like the average senator or rep is worth a couple million or something crazy like that. But, there are still normal people there. And there are still people who can be swayed. And I think it's important that we be not cynical about that. As you're saying, Alex, it is a tremendous thing that we can talk to the people that legislate for us and they have to listen. That's a relatively modern thing, right? Yeah. Like you used to turn your back on the king and then you get beheaded. I was traumatized when I found that out as a child. I was like, that's crazy.
I think technically if you turn your back on the queen now, they still cut off your head.
See, you just ruined my day,
sure
sir.
That you have to still do the weird, like I'm not turning my back on you. Which is the dumbest thing ever. You're like, really, the Windsors? You think the Windsors are worth bowing and scraping to?
Yes.
The house of white supremacy forever. Yeah. So I don't want to go too much on this. Brad's heard my Windsor take for a long time, but it's like, can you believe the racism in the royal family? You're like, yes. What do you think it is built on? Like the British Empire and all of that was not like, hey, I say, let's bring. Oh, that was a Southern one. I am dropping my
rude.
British.
Offensive to our Southern people who are not known for racism in any way.
The last concentration camp in Kenya was closed. British concentration camp was closed in 1960s. So like, I feel the Windsors get away with, and then they get this show made out of them. That's just like, so all of that idea, the whole idea of aristocracy is built on foundationally white supremacy. And you can kind of say it in however you want, but it is superiority of the few over everyone else. And that comes out in expressions of structural racism all the way up to genocide. Because as soon as you believe that some people are inherently better than others, then you believe that those people can make life and death decisions over the people who are less. And we, as progressives, as people who fight on the side of people, have to reject that entire thing. And we can't even make common cause with that. We can't say, oh, well, Hitler also believed in guaranteed health care. So there's no overlap. The moment you give anything on the idea that some people are inherently worth less than others, then you will end up. So if you're not fighting to take the boot off of everyone's neck and actually getting rid of the boot will end up on your neck. That's just the way life and power works. So,
well, I love that you bring up Hitler because it's true. He was
I love that you bring up Hitler.
It's important. Okay. He led a very impactful life. I mean, I do think it's important that that we talk about the fact that fascists, authoritarians, dictators, they all they get there by appealing to people. They don't start out their platform with like, so I'm going to kill 6 million people. No, they say, I'm going to bring peace to Germany. I'm going to spur the economy forward. And it's so, in our very American Protestant desire to be so black and white, we actually lie about how this process looks in a way that's very scary and limits our ability to mitigate it in our own, not even our own country, but just even like at a social level. Nobody is all evil all the time, which is what makes evil so dangerous. It's not like villains, whether they're in a social or a political context, enter the room and are like, hey, everybody, I'm a psychopath. I'm bad. I have bad intentions. Like, everyone should know that going forward. That's not how it works. And what you have is like this Batman idea of how morality works that, again, he's got some crazy outfit and like maybe a crazy backstory. No, a lot of these people are very clean cut, very educated, and they work for a pharmaceutical company. And if tons of people happen to die because of the price gouging that exists on their weirdly patented product, well, that's just too bad. That's just how the market works. Like, our ability to discern evil is not great right now because although was it ever, I mean, we as humans are very easily manipulated into believing that bad actors don't have bad intentions because then you have to do something about it. It's much kinder to believe that Silicon Valley or again, the pharmaceutical companies are just like this, like throbbing pool of innovation and everything they do is good, because to really acknowledge the dark, terrifying side of a lot of these industries, it's a very vulnerable and scary feeling.
Yeah, I think also there is, I think there's a psychological term for it. I don't remember what it is though, but it's good and decent people are the majority. People who are predators are a small minority. Part of the way that they function is that the good and decent people aren't able to actually mentally see the world from their perspective. So when I say that Wall Street and Big Pharma, which is Wall Street again, that to get to the top of these, they select for psychopathy. And so you find an enormous amount of people who have zero empathy at the top of these. And so it's like they raise the prices of insulin so that they reach a price so that some people die, so that everyone else is terrified enough to spend all the money they have and everything they can borrow to keep themselves or their family alive. Decent people reject that. They're like, nah, it can't be that bad. I don't think that anyone, and you're like, that's where you're wrong. There are definitely people who profit off of misery and destruction. And the way that we defeat them is by building a system that boxes them out, that pushes them out, that incentivizes the right thing, that doesn't select for psychopathy. And on the other side, knowing that as they get power, they will use that power to enshrine their own position in the political sphere as well. And, that's what these plutocrats do. They build enough wealth through exploitative practices. Behind any great fortune is a great crime. And the last part of that little very true statement is then they take the great fortune and use it to buy a political system to wash away their great crime. And then you can still see their names on the outside of museums to this day. That is what we have to fight against. And we have to understand that the system is generally not going to be on our side. Very few of our people, some of them do, but very few of our people are actually going to have their names, carved in stone. Our fight is the fight of millions and billions of people, normal, everyday people who are just doing what they do, but doing it all together and fighting against the fascists who would erect the statues to themselves and their culture. But we are in a moment where we keep seeing some of these statues getting torn down. And that is exciting to me. And I feel like that is where we are at a crossroads, and we have a decision to make. So don't sleepwalk through it. I don't think our listeners are the sleepwalkers, but tell your friends and family not to sleepwalk through it either, because this is the moment. This is it.
Well, and I have so much I want to say, and we only have 3 minutes.
Yeah, you can just close this out, Jocelyn.
I don't want to close this out. Alex and
I want you to close this out so that I can step on your closeout the way that you stepped on my my intro.
Rude, as if you don't interrupt me at other points throughout the show. Ridiculous. No, I reject that premise. Okay, no, but honestly, you know what? Alex and I we're gonna write a book, The History of Psychopathology and How It Has Ruined Everything. Because honestly, like as you're talking, all I keep thinking about is like, yes, you're absolutely correct. In fact, you could pretty much sum up human history over the past couple thousand years with the problem is most people are not psychopaths, which leads them ill-equipped to recognize sociopathy, extreme narcissism, anything of that nature. I realize I have 2 minutes. I'm going to go fast. There is one thing that we need to understand, like this whole idea, oh, humans are terrible. No, actually, the majority of human beings are quite good. The majority of human beings will go out of their way to do a good deed for someone on the train or pull someone out of the way of a moving car. The majority of human beings are actually very compassionate, decent people. The problem, though, is that exact same thing is we're incredibly easily manipulated. And we don't want to think we are, because that's not a fun thing to think about yourself. But if you are a decent, loving person, it's very easy for you to believe that other people are as well. Even if history, perfect example is why we revere Winston Churchill, despite everything he did in India, despite a number of other, because we don't like to believe in villainy. And that is our opportunity to create a world where there are fewer villains. Because again, we do have this tremendous opportunity right now to pass some incredible legislation. And I feel like I haven't been positive enough this show because it is very, very exciting. Like
202-224-3121. Think of Prince. Call your members of Congress. Tell them we want it all. Compromise is not, don't compromise on our backs. We want it all.
I don't even consider that an interruption. That was just good information. Yeah, seriously, call your members. We have an amazing, it could be kind of amazing. We'll see you guys next Friday.
Bye.
Bye.